It was meant to be an easy Friday night. Emily and I were on our way to the Ivy, a place we frequently visited with our friends. I had no desire to interact with others, to be honest. All I wanted to do was stay home, have a beer, and feast on something mindless because work had been eating away at me. But we need to go out more, Emily had argued. Jack, she insisted, while applying her distinctive red lipstick and slipping into her elegant black dress. There was no room for debate in her tone. The place was bustling by the time we got there. It was our usual group. Emily's best friend, Chloe, often overly dramatic, was there. A few people drifted in and out of the circle, including Jason, the boisterous joker. As usual, Emily took center stage. She sailed through discussions, leaning just a bit too close to people while laughing. She had a magnetic personality. She was aware of it. I attempted to participate, but it seemed as though I was invisible. All of my jokes fell flat. Emily would always interrupt me with something more incisive, something that would draw the focus back to herself whenever I tried to strike up a conversation. Her dominance of the room was nothing new, yet tonight it felt different. She laughed more loudly. Her eyes didn't focus on me, and her touches lingered longer. Once I saw her phone in the middle of the night. It sat face down on the table, buzzing sporadically. Emily would always look at it and grin. It was a smile I hadn't seen in months, but she didn't pick it up, allowing it to buzz as though she were enjoying a private joke. "Who is it that texts you so much?" I inquired, attempting to sound casual. At this hour, Emily didn't usually check work-related information. At last, she looked at me. Her eyes were contemptuous and icy. "It's a campaign, Jack. Deadlines never expire. Can't we?" Something wrenched in my stomach, but I let it drop. The toast followed. Emily stood up suddenly and used a spoon to clink her glass. Everyone turned to her in anticipation of one of her trademark witty roasts or a humorous story. Instead, she lifted her glass and said, "Cheers to patience." To Jack, who quite honestly endures more than anyone else. After a moment of silence, Jason forced a laugh to break the tension. I wasn't laughing, but the others were. I froze. She wasn't being lighthearted. The words were sharp and filled with an internal humor that I was not aware of. The audience was watching, waiting for my response, so I forced a weak smile and lifted my glass, even though inside I wanted to confront her right then and there. It seemed as if someone had hit me. I leaned in very close when she eventually took a seat. Why on earth was that happening? She didn't flinch at all. "Calm down, Jack. Don't be such a farce. You must learn to relax. It's absurd to make fun of me in front of our friends," I said. Her phone buzzed again before she could respond. She snatched it up and texted back quickly, "I need some air," dragging her thumb hastily over the screen. I mumbled as I stood up suddenly. The bar's muttering faded as I stepped outdoors into the chilly night. My thoughts were racing as I moved farther away. Did I overreact? That toast wasn't typical. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. My phone vibrated in my pocket before I could gather my thoughts. Emily sent a message. "How are you? You know I love you, right?" I gazed at the display. My heart was racing. For the first time, I didn't respond. Something was going on, something she wasn't telling me, and I was going to find out what it was. The words felt empty, as if she was trying to appease me rather than genuinely caring. I returned to the bar after Emily sent me a halting text. The atmosphere inside felt suddenly different, as if I were in a room where everyone else knew a secret. Emily returned to the table, her phone noticeably missing. Whatever they were discussing, I wasn't supposed to hear it. She was deep in conversation with Chloe, who kept looking at me with a strange mixture of pity and amusement. Jason waved Jack to signal me to stop. "Get another drink, man. You appear to have seen a ghost." With a false laugh, I waved him away and made my way directly to the bar. I kept my eyes on Emily while ordering a whiskey, something to calm me down. She continued to laugh. Sharp and pointed was the crowd. I didn't want it. I had no idea what I was searching for. Perhaps there was a rift in her facade, a mistake that would account for the sudden unease. And then I caught sight of it. Emily's phone was slid across the table by Chloe. Emily bit her lip as though to contain a smile as she glanced at it for a moment before swiftly turning it face down once more. It was more than I could handle. With my heart racing, I leaned in and walked over. We're heading out now. Emily's expression was blank as she looked up. We arrived just now. Chloe smirked as she sipped her drink, saying, "Don't be such a buzzkill." "Oh, Jack, hurry up. Let her enjoy herself. She has been putting in a lot of work lately." That was the tipping point for me. "Let's go, Emily, or I'll—" She tossed her serviette on the table and rolled her eyes. "All right." We didn't say goodbye to anyone before we went, if that's how essential it is to you. We walked to the car, her heels tapping hard against the pavement. It was oppressive to be silent with each other. She crossed her arms and stared out the window like a reprimanded adolescent when we got in. "Emily, what the devil is happening?" I finally asked. She turned to face me, narrowing her gaze. "What are you discussing? Don't act foolish. The texts, the toast, and your weeks-long behavior. What's happening?" A ruthless smile curved over her lips. "You're so paranoid, Jack. It's not all about you." I held onto the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "What is it about, then?" "Because you really do seem to be hiding something." She didn't respond. Instead, she completely ignored me and turned her head back to the window. I gritted my teeth and turned on the ignition. Emily immediately went to the toilet after we arrived home and locked the door. She flung her purse carelessly onto the couch, and I stood in the living room, staring at it. My mind was racing, and my hands were shaking. I opened it, though I'm not sure what got me. She didn't have her phone. She had, of course, brought it along, but she also had her work tablet, which was unlocked. I paused for a second, feeling like my conscience was telling me to quit. However, the voice sounded louder, saying, "Jack, you already know something's wrong. Just confirm." Nothing appeared when I opened her messages, email, everything pertaining to business. I was going to shut it when I saw an app one didn't recognize, a name I had never seen before. It looked harmless. When I tapped it, my blood froze. The first message I saw was from an anonymous phone. Saved him. It was a fantastic night. "Emily, I can't stop thinking about you." "I agree. Next week at the same time." I shivered as I scrolled up. There was no possibility of misunderstanding because the messages were so obvious. Each sentence was like a dagger, confirming what I had been too scared to utter aloud. Before I heard the restroom door unlock, I knew the truth. Emily froze as she entered the living room, wiping her hands with a towel. Her eyes shot to the screen as soon as she spotted me holding her tablet. "Why on earth are you doing this?" Her voice was sharply clipped. This made my chest heave as I stood up. "Emily, what is this?" I extended the tablet. As the messages glared back at her, her face briefly changed before becoming icy and aloof. She crossed her arms and curled her lip into the same ruthless smile. "Are you really going through my belongings right now? You are so pitiful, Jack. You dare not turn this against me." I snarled. "Emily, how long have you been lying to me?" "Months, weeks." She was utterly silent. She then gave a shrug, her voice cold. "Is it important?" My entire universe fell apart at that very instant. Her remarks lingered in the atmosphere like a ticking time bomb. "Is it important?" I looked at Emily, finding it difficult to understand what she had just said. My chest constricted as I continued to hold onto the tablet, as if it were the only thing supporting me. "Emily, what on earth does that mean?" "It is important, of course." She rolled her eyes as if this were a small annoyance. "You're overreacting, Jack. It's not very important." I could feel my face getting hotter. "Not a huge concern? You're secretly messaging a guy about whatever it is that I'm talking about, and you don't seem to care?" Her smile returned, piercing and patronizing. "All right, do you want the truth?" "Indeed," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "To be honest, I have been seeing someone, so I'm not even sure why you're so surprised. For months, you have been checked out." I stepped back as if her words had struck me physically. "Are you serious? To keep this place and this life together, I've been working extremely hard. And you're off doing stuff in the interim." For emphasis, I shook the tablet as I held it up. Emily gave another shrug, not bothered. "Perhaps I wouldn't have needed to search elsewhere if you had given me a bit more attention." That was it. Something broke inside of me. The bang reverberated across the room as I slammed the tablet down on the coffee table. "Do not attempt to blame me for this. Emily, you made this decision. You chose to betray me by lying. You're to blame for that." She kept her expression unflinching, very cold. Oh, don't do that self-righteous thing to me. You're not exactly a saint, Jack. You didn't even notice because you were so preoccupied with your valuable job. I was not happy. You don't communicate with me. I don't feel wanted by you. What were you anticipating? What I was hearing was unbelievable. Not happy? You have the option to speak with me. Emily, express your feelings to me. You didn't need to ruin our marriage because you felt uncared for. Emily chuckled, a sour, humorless sound. Speak with you? Please. Jack, you don't pay attention. You simply nod and return to your emails or whatever else requires your attention. Admit it. We've been finished for some time. Simply put, you're too blind to notice it. Her words were sharp, each one cutting deeper than the last. I collapsed onto the recliner, staring at her in shock as my legs failed me. That's it then? You just decided it's over, and you're sneaking around behind my back instead of informing me. Was it worthwhile, Emily? Was he worth it? Her self-assurance faltered. She turned her head away and clenched her jaw. You don't need an explanation, and neither do I. I yelled, getting back up. Who is he? Tell me. She paused, considering her response. Then, as though bored by the entire discussion, she let out a loud sigh. All right. It's Matt from work, if you must know. Matt. I was acquainted with him. One of the marketing guys was him. Every now and then, Emily brought up a character she had always regarded as innocuous and somewhat of a dork. The idea of him smugly and ignorantly texting my wife while I worked nonstop to keep us afloat made my hands clench. You're risking everything for that person. Matt. My voice was brimming with incredulity. Emily grinned. Jack, he pays attention to me. He gives me a sense of appreciation. You obviously forgot how to do it. I was suffocating on her poisonous words. Thank you. You believe he values you. You're using him, Emily, and he's using you. Don't come running back to me for the first time when this blows up in your face. She seemed very irate. Don't you believe you've improved so much? Jack, you act like you're the ideal husband. You're not. You are monotonous, predictable, and, to be honest, draining. I required more. The floor seemed to be collapsing under me. This went beyond simple treachery. It was the total destruction of all I believed we had. I inhaled deeply as I tried to regain my composure. You're amazing. For what purpose, Emily? Have you devastated us? She shrugged again, as if he was already planning his next fling. It was that enraged apathy again. Perhaps he is. Perhaps he isn't. I feel alive, at least while I'm with him. Alive. That word mockingly reverberated in my head. Leave. I spoke in a frigid, quiet voice. She raised her eyebrows. Please pardon me. Emily, get out, I said. Go spend time with your beloved Matt. Join him in feeling alive. Just leave my place for a minute. It appeared as though she might argue. Then, slowly and deliberately, she reached for her keys and pocketbook. Okay, I'll go, but don't give it any thought. I am solely responsible for this. You forced me to do this, Jack. I couldn't, so I didn't answer. She slammed the door behind her as she left, and I just watched. The ensuing hush was deafening. I took a seat again and gazed at the tablet resting on the table. For the first time in years, I felt totally alone, and the message was still staring at me like a wound that would not go away. It was disturbingly quiet in the home, as a teasing reminder that Emily had once been here, walking these same floors, sharing this existence. Her perfume was still somewhat there in the air the following morning. She had now left to go wherever Matt was. I thought I didn't get much sleep since my thoughts kept going over everything that happened during the disagreement, including the words, her indifference, her nasty smile, and the way she left, as though it were just another small argument and not the end of our marriage. She seemed to have been organizing her departure for months, and by 7 a.m., I was so exhausted that I was unable to remain in bed any longer. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and put on an old hoodie. Every week, as it brewed, the coffee pot sputtered, and I just gazed at it. My mind was racing. Was I really that blind? Had Emily simply become that skilled at lying? Or had I missed all the warning signs? My phone then buzzed. I grabbed it out of impulse, hoping for a shred of guilt. I'm not even sure what an apology is. It was actually a text message from Jason. Hey Jason, how are you? It was a very stressful night. I didn't answer. How could I respond? I chose to scan through my contacts instead, pausing when I saw Chloe's name. I couldn't get her smug little smile at the bar out of my head. She was aware that she must. I called Jack before I could second-guess myself, and Chloe answered groggily. It's still early. What is going on? Tell me, please. Flatly, I said. You and Emily seemed to get along well last night. Would you mind telling me what in heck is happening? A pause, followed by a sigh. I'd rather not get engaged in this, Jack. It's between Emily and you. That shit doesn't pull. You've been her closest friend for years, Chloe. Didn't you know about Matt? This time, the pause is longer. Then look, Emily confided in me about a few things. You just sat there grinning like the cat that swallowed the canary as she made a mockery of me because I didn't think it was my place to speak. I tried to remain calm, but my voice rose. Don't do this, Jack, Chloe moaned. You have your version of events, but Emily has been unhappy for a while. You were expecting this. The remarks were like a kick to the stomach. Anticipate it. What exactly are you discussing? She felt unheard, Jack, as if she didn't exist. You missed her disintegrating because you were too preoccupied with your own problems. It's not an excuse. I lost my temper. Instead of rushing off to some sleazeball from work, she might have spoken to me if she was dissatisfied. Perhaps she ought to have. Chloe spoke in a stronger tone now. But let's not act as though you're innocent, Jack. Relationships take time. It was more than I could handle. What do you know? Ignore it. Have fun filling in for her. You are equally as awful as she is. Before she could answer, I hung up. My heart was racing. The space felt cramped, and I could hear Chloe's comments echoing in my head, blending with Emily's from the previous evening. Was it me who was the issue? Had I overlooked anything so apparent? No, I wasn't at fault. I never betrayed her. I told the truth. Either sneak past her or make fun of her in front of our pals. I wasn't flawless, yes, but this wasn't fair to me. I reached for my phone, scrolled down to Emily's contact, and hovered my finger over the call button as my wrath flared up once more. I felt like screaming at her. She is forced to face the mess she created when she demands answers. You're going to stop by and pick up your belongings, I texted instead. Let me know when. Please make sure I'm not here, because I don't want to see you. She responded very immediately. I'll figure it out, Emily. Do not be concerned. I also don't want to see you. It stung more than I thought it would. Even now, she was unable to summon any remorse or compassion. I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. For the first time since it all began, I felt something more than anger or betrayal as the coffee in my mug grew cold. I was sad. Sadness for the life we had created, for the person I believed her to be, for my former self who had faith in us. I knew this wasn't simply the end of my marriage. Even as the cracks began to emerge and the morning light came in through the window. For the past 6 years, it was the end of who I was. The home was quiet by noon, but I wasn't. I was unable to sit still. I tried cleaning, scouring already spotless dishes, and folding unnecessary laundry, but to no avail. There were memories of Emily in every nook and cranny of this house, and each one seemed like a dagger cutting deeper. Like a ghost, the iPad rested on the coffee table. The messages are seared in my mind, but it's screaming dark now. It was a fantastic night. Her response was, same time next week. The thought made my hands shake. She had intended to continue this way, as if our shared lives were merely an awkward background. I made the decision to dig and get the tablet once more. I delved into her emails, messages, and applications. I needed answers, even though I knew it wouldn't make a difference. I had to grasp the extent of this. The first thing I saw was her calendar. Dates that didn't fit with the rest of her itinerary were tagged with harmless little remarks, like late dinner office event or meeting. These weren't actual workplace activities. They were a cover-up. The realization of the amount of work she had put into tricking me made my stomach turn. Next came the emails. The majority had to do with work, but a handful from Matt jumped out. I'm excited for tonight, Matt. Shall we drive separately once more? Emily. Yes. Jack must not become suspicious. I almost tossed the tablet across the room. It went beyond simple treachery. It was satire. She didn't care because she knew exactly what she was doing. The hardest part was that the affair was no longer the only thing at stake. It was about how she didn't care about me and how she could laugh at the lies she had spoken. My phone buzzed with another message from Jason as I sat there looking at the screen. Are you sure you're all right, Jason? If you need anything, we're here to help. Jason has always been a devoted friend. He had no idea how bad this problem was, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him everything. Rather, I said, thanks, but not great, man. I'll be all right. However, I wouldn't be all right for some time. The remainder of the day flew by. I attempted eating at one point, but couldn't handle it. I kept thinking about Emily, the lies she told, and the icy, uncaring look in her eyes as she walked away. How did someone who said they loved me turn into this stranger? Panic struck me when I heard her car pull into the driveway in the late afternoon. She was not expected to return today. I hadn't had time to process the feelings that were still brewing inside of me. She was standing in the hallway as if nothing had happened when the front door opened. I'm here for my belongings, she said in a bland tone. I remained motionless and crossed my arms. You were unable to call first? A brief expression of annoyance crossed her face as her gaze shifted to me. Jack, I didn't think I needed your consent. You didn't. A heads up would have been nice, I remarked icily. You were quite explicit. You'd rather not see me. Emily shrugged as she walked by me and into the bedroom. I'll be short. I kept my distance from her, but I couldn't help but stare at her. Her hands were robotic, her face unreadable, as she snatched things out of the closet with every step. I couldn't help myself while she packed. That's it then. No apology, no explanation. This kind of packing things is a casual breakup. She glanced at me after pausing to hold a dress. Jack, what do you want me to say? Since I don't, I apologize and regret it. I fulfilled my obligations, and you fulfilled yours. I almost laughed, but it was devoid of humor. You intend to deceive me, make me feel inferior, and endanger our lives. For what? A fling? Emily squinted her eyes. Do you not understand? It has nothing to do with Matt. It was about me finally recognizing that you and I both deserve to be happy. I was never going to be happy with you. Her comments took the wind out of me like a sledgehammer. Do you feel happy about this? Lying, sneaking, and destroying everything we had worked so hard to create. She tossed the outfit into her luggage and turned away. I came here not to fight. Let me pack and go, please. I stood trembling with incredulity and rage. Emily, you're a coward. You didn't fulfill your obligation. Instead of correcting the things you ran, you chose the easy route, and worse, you don't even give a damn. She immediately covered it up, but for the first time, I noticed a break in her face, something like guilt. You could believe it or not, Jack, but I'm done telling you who I am. Then, without saying another word, she zipped up her bag, picked it up, and left. I didn't pay attention. I didn't shout. I refrained from crying. When I heard her car move out of the driveway and fade into the distance, I just stood there motionless. Even though it was truly finished, I had a realization at that same moment. She wasn't just lost to me. Perhaps the most painful thing was that I no longer had the illusion of who she was. Following Emily's departure, there was an uneasy silence. It was oppressive. I felt as though the house had completely engulfed me. There were signs of her wherever I looked, including her favorite cup remaining on the throw blanket counter. Her aroma was still clinging to the bedroom curtains, and she was always curled up and draped over the couch. My thoughts, which were a mixture of grief and rage, swirled into something worse as I sat in the living room and stared at the empty spot where her bag had been. How could I have overlooked this? How could I have missed the fissure she said had always existed? I couldn't get her words out of my brain. I was never going to be happy with you. I was worthy of happiness. I was forced to do this by you. It was frustrating because it seemed like she was the one who was harmed, as though her treachery was somehow acceptable, as if I wasn't sufficient. I needed a way to express myself, anything to prevent the thoughts from mindlessly devouring me. After grabbing my keys, I left the house as the chilly nighttime air slapped me. For a while, I drove without a purpose, not caring where I ended up. The city lights were spreading across the windscreen as the roads blended together. Thank God, I eventually found myself parked outside a small, seedy pub that I had never been to before, not the Ivy League. Smoke and the stench of stale beer filled the air within. It was not particularly welcoming, but that was irrelevant. I located a corner booth and kept my head down while ordering a whiskey. As the beverage scorched my throat, against my better judgment, I took out my phone. I went to Emily's social media accounts. She had yet to post anything. There were no mysterious sayings or meticulously chosen pictures of her new life. But that didn't stop her from creating the ideal story for herself in the meantime. Then it occurred to me, Matt, and I didn't even think twice. When I looked up his profile, I saw him grinning and smug, the type of person who most likely spent more time combing his hair than working. He posted the typical mix of embarrassing motivational quotations, gym selfies, and photos from marketing conferences. However, as I scrolled, I came upon a post from the previous week that was tagged at a restaurant. I was unable to ignore the caption. It read, "Great night with even better company," accompanied by a wine glass emoji. Emily's name and a heart emoji were tagged in the comments. I squeezed the glass until I was afraid it would break. This was no short-term error. This was intentional and planned. They no longer even made an effort to conceal it. I was startled out of my reverie by a voice that said, "Rough night?" The barman, a middle-aged man with a worn face, was standing close to my table when I looked up. He gave my almost empty glass a nod. "You appear to be in need of another." He returned with a new pour after I nodded. "Do you wish to discuss it?" he inquired. Normally, I would have dismissed him, but I couldn't contain myself tonight. My spouse betrayed me. I told him, quite plainly, with a guy from her office. He gave a low whistle and shook his head. "Man, that's difficult. Did you confront her?" "Yes, I did." I spoke, and it was clear how bitter I was. She made no attempt to deny it and pretended that I was to blame, that I had pushed her there. The bartender's face was scowling. That kind of hardens individuals. They are incapable of accepting accountability. It's easier to place the responsibility elsewhere. I nodded, appreciating what he had said. It did not, however, make the pain go away. I simply don't know how to proceed. It doesn't feel like it's over, even though she's gone now. With thoughtfulness, he tapped the edge of the table. Until you decide it's over, it won't feel that way. She's liked by others, and if you allow them to, they will drag you down. Don't grant her that authority. His remarks lingered in my mind. I experienced a brief moment of clarity as I finished my drink for the first time that evening. Even though Emily had stolen my trust, tranquility, and sense of security, she wasn't going to take away my future. I walked out of the bar feeling more determined than ever. Even though we still had to deal with issues like divorce papers, dividing our lives, and the expected questioning from friends and family, Emily had made her decision. It was time for me to make mine. I had had enough of being a victim in her tale. I woke up the following morning with a clarity that only comes after reaching the lowest point. Even if Emily's words still hurt, something had changed. She was no longer there to control the story, to turn my fears and shame into something she could exploit. Now, this was my tale, and I had to make choices. A lawyer was the first person I called. I must begin the process of getting a divorce. I uttered into the phone, the words tasting necessary but bitter. Claire, the lawyer, a direct woman, demanded the information. I told her everything. Emily's lack of remorse, her callous rejection of our marriage, and her adultery were jarring. Claire did not recoil. Her calm professionalism was just what I needed, even though it was obvious she had heard worse. "Collect whatever papers you may have," she stated. "Anything that connects the two of you financially, such as joint accounts, bank statements, and property deeds, could be useful in discussions. If you had proof of her adultery, the evidence, the messages on her tablet, the text from Matt, was more than sufficient." A part of me questioned whether using them against her would be too cruel, but then I recalled how she laughed at me and wrote me off as a side note in her quest for happiness. I had no intention of being fair. No more. Under Claire's direction, it felt clinical, like dissecting the corpse of our relationship, but it also felt empowering as I spent the next few hours going through every shared document, email, and file that linked Emily and me. I was in charge for the first time in weeks. I texted Jason after the second strike. "I must speak. Is it possible for us to meet?" "Jason? My place in an hour, of course." I was dumping everything on Jason's couch an hour later. Silently, he listened. An uncommon seriousness replaced his typical light-hearted manner. "Dude, I had no idea it was that bad when I finished," he remarked. "Emily, You were actually harmed by her. Yes. She didn't even seem to care, I said, looking at the floor. She walked away as if it were any other day. Jason ran a hand through his hair and leaned back. Jack, that's cold. Quite cold. But you know what? I wouldn't have handled it the way you are. I would have gone crazy. I forced a flimsy smile. Oh, don't worry. I've experienced my moments. You know, Chloe's been acting weird too, Jason remarked after he hesitated. I'm not sure if she's aware of this whole situation with Emily, but I feel uneasy. The person who had grinned at me on the night at the bar was Chloe, Emily's closest friend and confidant. She was more informed than she admitted. I had no doubt about it. Do you believe she was aware? I inquired. Jason gave a slow nod. I'd be surprised if she didn't. Emily and Chloe get along well. Chloe was most likely covering for Emily if she was skulking around. That resolved the matter. My next target for the confrontation was Chloe. I gave Chloe a call later that day. Her voice was too loud, as if she had been expecting me, and she answered on the second ring. How is life in the drama zone, Jack? If it isn't. Chloe, stop the nonsense, I said with a stern voice. We must speak face to face. She paused, and her light-hearted tone wavered. Yes, of course. What's going on here? You are fully aware of its purpose. On the other end, there was stillness, then a sigh. All right. On the 5th, meet me at the coffee shop. Chloe was there when I got there, drinking an iced cappuccino and browsing through her phone as if nothing were wrong. I walked up to her, wary, and she looked up. She put down her drink. What are you thinking about? I asked as I sat across from her. You knew. Didn't you know about Emily and Matt? Chloe did not recoil. She crossed her arms and sat back in her chair. How about if I did? Now, does it make a difference? I balled my fist beneath the table. By helping her, it makes a difference. For her, you lied. You remained silent while allowing her to degrade me. Chloe rolled her eyes. Jack, you're exaggerating the situation. Emily was wretched. She needed to get away. Although I disagreed with her approach, it was not your place nor mine to step in. I raised my voice. You took a seat there. As she lied to me, I laughed with her. Why isn't that where you belong? Leaning forward, Chloe's voice became cold. Look, I understand, Jack. Perhaps you ought to ask yourself why you feel hurt. In the first place, Emily thought she couldn't be honest with you. Relationships do not simply end abruptly. The final straw was that. I got up and gave her a fierce look. Chloe, you can defend her all you want, but don't come back with excuses after this is over, and she goes on to the next escape. Without waiting for an answer, you made your decision. After turning, I left the coffee shop. As I entered the chilly air, I could hear my footfall reverberating in my ears. I understood that I had lost more than simply Emily. I didn't care that I had also lost Chloe, or perhaps I never had her at all. Now that everything was coming together, I wasn't going to let anyone else change the course of events in the days that followed. My encounter with Chloe was a flurry of emotions, including betrayal and rage, still flowing through me. But now they were accompanied by a more powerful resolve. Surviving Emily's betrayal was no longer the only goal. This was about taking back my life, one piece at a time. I poured myself into getting ready for the divorce. Claire got to work promptly, filing the required documents and giving me advice at every turn. Like untangling a tapestry, the procedure was exhausting. I had been weaving it for years. Every memory was cataloged, every asset was divided, and every account was closed. The toughest thing was the silence, even though it felt like I was tearing apart the life I believed I had. Emily didn't text or call. She seemed to have completely wiped me from her life in a single day. And perhaps that's what hurt the most, how effortlessly she left, leaving nothing but confusion and unresolved questions in her wake. Then one night, I received a call from an unidentified number. Hi there, I responded, my voice cautious. It was Emily. I held the phone firmly, feeling my chest getting tighter. What are you looking for? Her tone was serene, even impersonal. I received the divorce papers from Claire. I wanted to inform you that I will be signing them. This doesn't need to be prolonged. She spoke in such a transactional, cold tone. It made me feel angry all over again. That's all. No apology, no explanation. You only need to quickly sign to be finished. Her sigh was laden with impatience. Jack, what do you want me to say? That I regret what happened and that I'm sorry? I don't. This was bound to happen. Unavoidable. My voice shook again. Emily, you cheated on me. After months of lying to me, you're now acting as though I deserved it and that this was a normal progression. A long pause ensued. I didn't call to fight, she said. To make things easier, I called. Do you want to get your closure? All right. I'm going to sign the documents. The story's conclusion. I gave a sour laugh. You believe that I can get closure by signing a document? You believe that all you've done is erased. Her tone became stern. It was you who wanted this to be over with. It is now. Jack, don't drag it out. It's pitiful. She hung up after that. There I stood. The call's silence was more profound than what she had said. This was cruelty, not merely indifference. I paced the house after the call, realizing that she wanted me to feel small and helpless. And for a brief period, I did. Her words were still ringing in my head. The numbers didn't add up. Why call at all if Emily was so ready to go on? I thought, why don't I just sign the papers and be done with it? She detested the fact that she was no longer in charge. Our marriage wasn't over when we signed those documents. She was no longer in charge of me. I gained strength from that insight. The following day, Claire and I sat down and talked over the terms of the divorce settlement. Don't allow her to be hurt and go. My voice was solid as I said. It is not her place to ruin my life and leave everything intact. Claire nodded, her face solemn. Jack, be ready, but we'll make sure this is fair. She will continue to fight back if she is as chilly as you claim. She did. From the mansion to the tiniest shared assets, Emily disputed nearly every aspect of the deal. Despite her hateful emails to Claire accusing me of being petty and vindictive, I refused to back down. It's not the breaking point this time. I received another call from Chloe a week later. I just wanted to let you know, her voice was brimming with phony worry as she spoke. Emily has been claiming that you are attempting to destroy her life. She claims that you are punishing her by prolonging the divorce. I made a scathing, humorless chuckle. She is, of course. Doesn't that sound like her MO? Act like the victim. Make the other people the villain. After a pause, Chloe replied, Look, Jack, I know you're upset. You have no knowledge. I lost my temper. Don't accuse me of being indifferent. You're just as involved in this as she is. Before she could answer, I hung up. Something changed inside of me that night. I refused to be portrayed as the bad guy by Emily or her supporters. I refused to allow them to change the course of my life. I retrieved all of the evidence from my laptop. I organized my emails, texts, and pictures into a tidy folder. It wasn't retaliation. It wasn't intended to harm her. I did it to safeguard myself and ensure that, should she attempt to distort the facts more, the facts would be on my side. After finishing, I sat back and inhaled deeply. Both the hurt and the rage were still present. However, I felt in control for the first time. Emily might attempt to change the story, but I refused to allow her. She earned this ending, even though it wasn't the one she desired. Negotiations for a divorce came to a head 2 weeks later. As usual, Emily wasn't simply battling for what she believed she was entitled to. She was struggling to maintain narrative control. In an email, her attorney accused me of being irrational and vengeful, saying that I had prolonged the proceedings to make her life more difficult. I sent it to Claire with a brief letter that said, Use everything we have. Claire didn't think twice. She turned in the evidence the following day, including screenshots of Emily's conversations with Matt, calendar entries that didn't correspond with her work schedule, and even financial records that revealed she had used our joint money for what I could only presume were their mini vacations. Emily's tone changed at the conclusion of the week. A counterproposal that was noticeably less forceful was emailed by her attorney. It appeared that someone had changed their mind, but I wasn't quite satisfied when Claire read it out loud with a sly smile. Assets and money were no longer the only factors involved. Truth was at issue. I received a dinner party invitation from Jason and some of my pals on Friday. They claimed it was to distract me, but I could tell they were interested in the drama as well. It made no difference. Even though it was overwhelming to think of having to face everyone, I needed a night out. Jason gave me his customary bear embrace when I got there. It's nice to see you, dude. You look more alive and better. Regards, I said, keeping a tiny smile on my face and taking each day as it comes. The wine flowed, and the topic eventually shifted to Emily as the evening wore on. Jason was the first to mention it, lowering his voice as though he were disclosing a sinister secret. Chloe has been talking nonstop. He looked at me as he spoke. Emily has apparently been saying, "You're out for blood." I leaned back in my chair and replied, "Let her. She has nothing left to stand on." Jason's eyebrow went up. "You appear composed about this." "I have receipts." All I got was a few giggles from the crowd. The true surprise, though, was when Lisa, another buddy, added her voice. "I saw Matt the other day, you know." Her eyes were keen, yet her tone was easygoing. There was silence in the room. He didn't appear to be very joyful. Lisa noted that things weren't exactly going well with Emily, while she kept swirling her drink. I straightened my posture. Lisa shrugged. "But what did you mean?" He only mentioned that it's complicated and didn't say much else, but he didn't appear like a man in love. I felt a rush of satisfaction at the concept. It was almost poetry, even though it was falling apart now that Emily had thrown everything away for Matt. But when Jason took out his phone, it was the nail in the coffin. He scrolled through his messages and added, talking about receipts. "Take a look at this." My jaw tensed when I scanned the screen of his phone as he handed it to me. Chloe had sent him a message earlier that day, and it was a screenshot of that message. "Emily, Chloe is going crazy. Jack has put her in a difficult situation. She fears that he will damage her reputation." Jason grinned and appeared to be perspiring. With an odd mixture of satisfaction and regret, I returned the phone. A part of me wanted to celebrate Emily's breakdown, but another part of me that still recalled the happy times, the giggles, the love, and the last meeting felt empty. Emily called me a couple of days later. Curiosity overcame me, and I nearly didn't respond. "What are you looking for?" I spoke in a tone that was colder than I had intended. She spoke in an unusually quiet tone. "Jack, could we have a face-to-face conversation about?" "Why?" I asked with mistrust because she hesitated. "I must apologize to you." I consented, even though I didn't trust her. We met in a neutral location, a park we frequented during our good times. She appeared different, more reserved, and had lost all of her sharpness and assurance. "I've been contemplating. I was mistaken about you, about us," she began, staring at the ground. "About everything." I made it difficult for her by folding my arms. "You took too long." She winced but went on. "I don't think you'll pardon me. I simply had to apologize for the lies and the way I handled everything." I was momentarily at a loss for words. I had been waiting for this apology, but it felt hollow now that it had arrived. "Thank you for apologizing," I finally said, "but it makes no difference. Both of us must now live with the decisions you made, Emily." She gave a nod. Her eyes were filled with tears. "I simply don't." "I know." I interrupted her. "This cannot be rewritten by you. Not right now." For the first time, I saw sincere regret on her face as she looked at me, but it didn't matter anymore. She was standing there in the park, a ghost of the lady I used to love, when I turned and left. A peculiar calmness descended upon me as I drove home. Our lives had been destroyed by Emily, but I was beginning to rebuild from the ashes, this time creating something more robust and unique for myself. The divorce was finalized in silence. There were no big courtroom battles or heated arguments, just a few signatures, a few lawyer emails, and the formal declaration that Emily and I were no longer married. I spent a considerable amount of time staring at the screen after receiving Claire's email confirming that everything was finished. The word seemed unreal. It was almost done, everything I had battled so hard to save. However, I experienced relief rather than sadness. I had finally shed the burden I had been carrying for months, if not years, severing connections. I cleared the house as my first action. I packed up anything that could be found of Emily, including her clothes and ornaments. I hadn't even been able to bring myself to look at the framed pictures. The house felt emptier at the end of the day, but it also felt like mine. I gave away most of her belongings for the first time, but one box was left in the garage corner, taped shut and marked with her name. She could come and retrieve it if she so desired. Otherwise, it would remain there until I either forgot about it completely or came up with a solution. I then concentrated on myself. I resumed going to the gym. At first, it was just a means for me to vent my fury and rage, but it quickly became something more. I began to feel more resilient, both mentally and physically. Every weight lifted seemed like a tiny triumph. I was becoming farther away from the man I had been with her with every mile on the treadmill. I also got back in touch with old friends whom I had forgotten about throughout my marriage. As promised, Jason supported me by taking me to social gatherings and ensuring that I didn't mope for too long. "See," he said, "I told you there's life after Emily. One night over beers." "Yes," I said, grinning for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. The unexpected message was correct. A couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized, one evening my phone rang with a message from an unidentified number. "It's Matt, Jack. Can we have a conversation?" I gazed at the display. Matt was the last person I expected to hear from. Against my better judgment, I responded. "What on earth are you going to say to me, Matt?" Curiosity, I only need 5 minutes. One out. Unaware of what to anticipate, I agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop. Matt was already there, appearing far less arrogant than I remembered. His face was pallid, and his shoulders were hunched. He appeared to be defeated. "I appreciate you coming," he murmured as I sat down. "Make it quick." I crossed my arms in response, and he nodded. He nervously rubbed the back of his neck. "I only wanted to apologize for everything. At first, I was unaware that Emily was married, and I should have left when I learned, but I chose to stay." I remained silent, allowing the silence to press him. "She also misled me, he continued. His sour tone gave me the impression that I was a terrible husband and that she was stuck in this awful marriage. I wanted to believe her, so I did. My jaw tensed, but I still said nothing. "And now," he said, laughing hollowly, "I can see her true self. She has already found another partner. She left me the same way she abandoned you." Hearing that was vindicating, but I kept my composure. "Matt, what were you expecting? That she never cheats on you, but cheats with you?" The truth hit him with more force than I anticipated as he flinched. "I suppose I'm worthy of that," he said silently. "Yes, you stood up," I said, "but it's not my responsibility to pardon you. It's not my problem. It's yours." I left him sitting there as a shadow of the man who had contributed to the breakdown of my marriage. I sat on my porch and watched the sun sink over the horizon, looking forward to that evening. I was able to breathe for the first time in months. Even while I still harbored wrath and bitterness, I was no longer under their influence. Emily had left. I was still here, but the life we had created was gone, and that felt like enough for the first time. I still didn't have all the answers. I was unsure of my next course of action, but I was certain of one thing. The man who had seen Emily tear apart my existence was no longer me. Now that I was wiser and stronger, I was prepared to rebuild. I needed this ending, even though it wasn't the one I had desired. I also became aware of something else as I saw the final rays of sunlight depart. I still had the best portions of my narrative to tell,